Mankind has always searched the stars looking for some type of connection. And that connection just might be getting closer with our recent space explorations. I got to sit down recently with a man whose job it is to report on such travels. So join me now as we go on a gorgeous reflection of the search for connection.
I'm Brendan Byrne and a reporter and host at WMFE. My job is to tell the story of space exploration, and yes, it's as cool as it sounds. It's pretty much the best job ever. I grew up in Florida. I watched shuttle launches in my backyard and always wanted to be an astronaut. And then I got to 6th grade algebra and realized I wasn't going to be an astronaut. So I followed another path and got into writing and eventually found my way back to space by telling all of these stories. I did my first space story in 2014. It was the first launch of the Orion space capsule, which we all just saw launch to the moon and then come back. But it was a preliminary mission to that one. And ever since then, fell in love with it, and our listeners really enjoyed hearing about it, so we kept doing it. And it's taken me some really cool places, and I continue to keep doing it. And I tell my colleagues that if they want this beat, they'll get it over my dead body, so.
Well, Brendan may be living his dream job, but I asked him why space travel was so important right now, especially when we have so many unsolved problems still right here on Earth.
I mean, it's cool, right? The stuff that going to space is cool. I think it's in our DNA as human beings to be explorers, and when we've pretty much explored everything on this rock that we're living on, it's time to get off of this rock and go find another rock to go look at. I think in this job I always get asked, well, why are we doing this? Is it worth the cost? Is it worth the money? And sometimes I don't think it is. It is a lot of money, and we could be spending a lot of that budget on other things. But I always go back to, it was May of 2020. It was, in the midst of the pandemic, we had really no idea what was going to happen. There was so much uncertainty. But NASA was launching humans on a mission, on a SpaceX capsule to the International Space Station, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. And we had never done this, and hadn't done it since the end of the Space Shuttle program in 2011. And for this brief moment in this year that was just absolutely terrifying and filled with uncertainty and sickness and death and economic turmoil, for one moment we could all collectively look east and watch Bob and Doug leave the planet on hardware that humans had made in probably some of the toughest circumstances ever, having to do it with social distancing and not knowing what was going to be next. And these guys left the planet. And we all took a moment and watched them do it, and they came home safe, and we got back to our terrible lives and uncertain lives. But for that brief moment, we could see that. And I think we really need that inspiration, right? And I think space brings that to us, that collectively we can do good and we can go beyond this rock that we thought we were stuck on before the 1950s and are able to actually leave this planet. So it's really just the collective efforts of humans being awesome and seeing what they can do. And now there's a lot of great things that come back from the space program. We can talk all sorts of spin-off things. A lot of medical technology has come from space. We're trying to solve things like cardiac issues and Alzheimer's through research that's happening right now on the International Space Station. And a lot of other things have come back to help us, like Velcro and stuff like that. So that's great, but I think just the inspiration of us all being able to look up and say, we did that as a species. We left this planet that we thought we were marooned on.
Moving beyond the Velcro and other space inventions, Brendan took some time to delve a little bit deeper into why searching the cosmos was so important to us.
Astronomy and space exploration, its biggest thing is to figure out our place and who we are and where we came from. And it goes back to one of the biggest changes in astronomy was when astronomers realized that we were not the center of the universe. When we learned that there was a heliocentric model of our solar system, that we orbited our sun and our sun orbited something else and that orbited something else, that we weren't the center of things, we learned our place. And once we understood where we were in this universe, we were able to uncover its secrets. And those are some of the same things that we are doing when we go to places like Mars. The Mars rover right now, the latest Mars rover, Perseverance, it is picking up samples and depositing them on the surface for a mission to come later and bring those samples back to Earth. And the reason we want to take a look at those samples is we think that there is evidence of ancient life in there. And if we can find evidence of ancient life, Mars is very much like our own planet. And so by uncovering those secrets, we can kind of see, it's a witness plate. We can see where we came from and how we developed, how our rock got life. But I think a lot of science and astronomy is trying to figure out who we are and where we came from. So really, space exploration and astronomy is figuring out where we came from and where we belong in this universe that is just mind-numbingly large.
So growing up here in Central Florida, I used to watch the space shuttle and dream of going into space. Might that be coming closer anytime soon?
NASA's working really hard to make sure that the people that are leaving this planet and going on these missions are people that resemble us and who we are. This next mission to the moon, Artemis, it's going to have the first person of color. It's going to have the first woman and the first international participant going around the moon. And I think that's really important. It's really important for people to see that there are pretty much all walks of life get the chance to do this. I think what's going to be really interesting is learning how to communicate and having these connections. It's very important for astronauts to feel connected. I remember talking to Scott Kelly. He was an astronaut on the International Space Station. He spent a year in space. And Scott has a brother, a twin brother, Mark Kelly, who's married to Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. He was on the space station when she was shot. And he said that was the hardest thing ever because I could not get down to my family and I couldn't be there for them. And for us to be able to figure out ways that we can still make those connections while going beyond our Earth orbit is going to be extremely important for our astronauts' well-being. Starting to develop some technology to be able to do that. But it's still something that is probably the hardest thing an astronaut has to do, is know that they're saying goodbye, know that they're not going to be there for the big moments down here on Earth, and know that they may not come back. That's tough. That's really difficult.
So connection is so important, whether you're orbiting the Earth 150 miles up or just sitting in a room by yourself. Loneliness can happen anywhere, especially on those days when the world feels particularly awful.
I think there's a lot of terrible things happening on this planet, but just knowing that, we are able to harness the terrible things and make some good out of them. I like to think back to the early space missions, the missions of, Alan Shepard and, Gus Grissom, who's one of my favorite astronauts. Those guys rode to space on intercontinental ballistic missiles. I mean, these were weapons that they were strapping themselves onto. Weapons that were designed to destroy other people. And they were able to harness it for something good, for us to leave this planet for the first time ever. And for once they weren't pointed at one another, they were pointed in the direction of humanity to go do something bigger than itself. And I think that gives me a little bit of hope. If we were able to turn missiles into something that has given us the International Space Station, that's giving us the moon missions, the Apollo missions of the 1960s, and now the Artemis missions of the 2020s, the discovery of exoplanets and possibly life outside of our own planet, then we can really take some of this bad and turn it into good. And that's a pretty optimistic thing for a journalist to say, who I'm a cynical journalist at that. But yeah, if we could turn the Cold War into something that got us to the moon, then we can really turn a lot of the bad here into something good.
So turning the bad into good is something we all should aim for. I want to thank Brendan for sharing a little glimpse of his world with us. And I want to invite you to continue these video series where we are searching connection not only with our fellow man, but also with ourselves. And of course, all these videos are leading up to the opening night of our upcoming art exhibit at Mills Art Gallery. I'll be there, as will many of the people I've interviewed. I hope you'll join us.